Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. The topic of this panel is South Asian Cinema Beyond Borders. It will run from 12:15 to 1:15 Eastern Standard Time. For those viewing on YouTube live stream, welcome. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat at any time. We will compile them and ask as many as possible to our panelists during the Q&A. Now, there will be a short video presentation by each of our panelists, after which the panel leader, Dr. Tanu Coulibague, will run a Q&A. Please remember that if you're not speaking, to please mute your microphone. Now I'd like to introduce the panel leader, Dr. Tanu Coulibague, teaching faculty, Global Citizenship Certificate and Center for Global Engagement at Florida State University. Welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last, but certainly not the least important panel for the South Asia Conference in the year 2021. We are virtual, and it's very exciting because it has opened doors to so many exciting talks. And I have had the privilege to lead this specific panel, where we are going to hear from some excellent speakers about the changing nature of the cinema in South Asian region. And what my plan is to introduce each set of panelists and or speakers as they come on, as their talk comes on, as opposed to giving you all their titles and their the subjects of their talk right now. And because we have multiple presenters, I do want to give more time at the end for question and answers and putting them really at the center stage. So I'll just jump right in. Our excellent lineup today will start with the presentation from Dr. Rekha Sharma and Dr. Theodoros Workney from Kent State University in United States. Their talk is titled Untold Stories, Giving Voice and Visibility to South Asian and African Diaspora Communities Through Film. In this talk, Drs. Sharma and Workney talk about the trauma of displacement and the struggles of acculturation that linger for many immigrants, and how they become acute as individuals attempt to resolve contradictions of values, norms, and expectations for their children. Through the lens of critical race theory, their presentation will explore the concepts of hybridity and intersectionality illustrated in Meera Nair's 1991 film, Mississippi Masala. Arya, if you could please show the video for Dr. Sharma and Workney, that would be awesome.
I'm Dr. Rekha Sharma. On behalf of myself and my co-author, Dr. Teddy Workney, I'm honored to deliver this presentation based on our book chapter, which was published last year in the edited volume, Films as Rhetorical Texts, Cultivating Discussions about Race, Racism, and Race Relations. For many immigrants, the immediate trauma of displacement and the struggles of acculturation linger, becoming acute as they try to resolve contradictions of values and expectations for their children. Therefore, as Shukla explained in 2017, films about diaspora communities often address the need to reconcile memories of a home left behind with acceptance of a new sense of place and identity. The 1991 film Mississippi Masala, directed by Meera Nair, tells the story of Meena, a woman of Indian descent, whose father Jay pines for his native Uganda, where his family had lived prosperously until dictator Idi Amin took power. Transplanted to rural Mississippi, the family struggles to make ends meet by operating a motel, but they don't feel at home. Meena describes her multicultural provenance as a masala, a Hindi word referring to a varying blend of spices. When Meena falls for an African-American entrepreneur, Demetrius, several layers of cross-cultural ferments arise between their families. The film explores narratives of identity, conflict, and shared humanity by delving into contemporary expressions of racism and the legacies of indentured labor. For our analysis of the film, we incorporated critical race theory with the concepts of intersectionality and hybridity. Critical race theory posits racism as an experience that is embedded in everyday social encounters as well as institutions. As Harris 2012 stated, CRT is an examination of how domination can persist without coercion. CRT's roots can be traced to critical legal studies. To make sense of issues of race and racism in Mississippi Masala, we supplemented CRT's traditional locus on legal doctrine with consideration of intersectionality and the post-colonial notion of hybridity. Crenshaw 2015 used the term intersectionality to highlight the multiple avenues through which racial and gender oppression were experienced so that the problems would be easier to discuss and understand. In Mississippi Masala, intersectionality is relevant to the expectations of Mina's family regarding her marriage prospects and to how the communities surrounding Mina and Demetrius interpret their relationship. Challenges arise partially due to cultural differences, but also due to gender norms and class divisions. Indian, Hindu, Ugandan, and American cultural exchanges in the film demand interrogation through the notion of cultural hybridity. Albert and Paez, 2012, contended that cultural hybridity constitutes the effort to maintain a sense of balance among practices, values, and customs of two or more different cultures. They explained, in cultural hybridization, one constructs a new identity that reflects a dual sense of being, which resides both within and beyond the margins of nationality, race, ethnicity, class, and linguistic diversity. We employed ideological analysis in critiquing racial and economic dynamics in the context of dislocation and intercultural contact. For Hall, 1986, an ideology represents the mental frameworks, the languages, the concepts, categories, imagery of thought, and the systems of representation, which different classes and social groups deploy in order to make sense of, define, figure out, and render intelligible the way society works. Throughout Mississippi Masala, Mina's identity is largely defined by her skin color. The way Mina's identity is constructed in the Indian community is particularly notable for its salience of colorism, the notion that those with lighter skin are afforded higher status than those with darker skin. Informed by Indian societal norms born of centuries spent under British colonial rule, colorism emerges as the lens through which others interpret Mina's choices and fate. In one scene, we see a group of Indian women disparaging Mina's mother Kinnu for seeing Harry Patel, a successful, educated man, as an ideal future husband for her daughter. As one of the women remarks, "You think this one has a chance? You can be dark and have money, or you can be fair and have no money, but you can't be dark and have no money and expect to get Harry Patel." Mina herself is aware of this belief as she remarks, "Face it, Ma, you got a darky daughter. Harry's mother doesn't like darkies." Thus, we learn that the low regard Mina gets from her Indian cultural circle is a consequence of her identity as defined by her color and her modest economic status. Later, we see Mina and Demetrius in the middle of racially charged crossfire involving the Indian and African American communities. Jay and Kinnu accuse Mina of bringing shame to their family by dating someone outside of her cultural group, and to make matters worse, someone who is Black and a carpet cleaner. The response from some of her cultural group is even more blatantly ethnocentric. As one Indian mother remarks, "Can you imagine dumping Harry Patel for a Black? I'm sending my Namita to India as soon as possible. They get ideas from each other and then it spreads like a disease." Similarly, Demetrius has been blamed for bringing trouble to himself and his family by going after, quote, "a white chick." When Jay tells Demetrius he needs to stay away from Mina, Demetrius stresses that Jay and his family reject him because of his race, saying, "I know you and your folk can come here, but you start acting white and treating us like your doormats. I know that you and your daughter ain't but a few shades from this here. That I know." For Mina, this signifies she does not have the complete agency to construct her own identity. Oftentimes, it is constructed for her by others. For African Americans, she is white. For Indians, she is Black. Cultural hybridity is a process that typically results in a unique sense of identity rather than the simplistic choice between home and host cultures often presented in cinema. In Mississippi Masala, Nair represents the challenges posed by globalization for people developing personal or shared narratives of cultural hybridity through the character's attire. For example, as her family gets ready to attend a Hindu wedding, Mina enters her parents' room wearing traditional Indian apparel. Kinnu tells her daughter to change out of her sneakers and put on slippers more suitable to her formal ethnic attire. Kinnu wears an Indian sari, while Jay opts to wear an African dashiki. The Loha family's choice of costumes showcases their diverse identities and their varying decisions about how closely to affiliate with the Indian and Black communities in Greenwood, Mississippi. For them, the African American and Indian American labels insufficiently capture their sense of identity, and they each must negotiate a hybrid identity that is unique to their experiences, values, and comfort levels. Chobe and Devasundaram 2017 underscored the capacity of cinema to provide venues for unpacking the melange of social, political, colonial, economic, ethnic, racial, and cultural issues that give flavor to diverse interconnected societies. Films such as Mississippi Masala provide narratives that may allow viewers to gain empathy and perspective about the multi-generational challenges faced by immigrant and minority groups as they negotiate multicultural identities and interactions.
Apologize. Thank you, Dr. Sharma, for that presentation and narration. So we are actually going to deviate a little bit from our structure here. Our second speaker, Sharon Farhana Moni and Mohammad Khurshid Aslam, who are from University of Southern Mississippi, could unfortunately not join us. Their presentation was titled Media Representation of Bangladeshi Safer Road Movement 2018 in Global Media. Since they're not here, we will just skip to our third presentation by Dr. Isfita Borat from St. Xavier's College in Kolkata, India. And in this talk titled Conglomerated Structure of Multiplex Businesses in India, Dr. Borat will discuss the rise of multiplex theaters as a generalized way of film viewing in India. She will attempt to reconsider this categorization of multiplex cinema and will attempt to understand, quantify, and study the impact of such conglomerated ownership on contemporary Hindi cinema. So Arya, can you please show the video for Dr. Borat?
Hello everyone, myself Ipshita Borat from India, and today I'm going to present my paper, Conglomerated Structure of Multiplex Business in India. Now, my paper basically attempts to chart out what were the changes in terms of narrative and style which were brought forward primarily with the arrival of multiplexes in India, and particularly it focuses on two stages. That is the embryonic stage, that is multiplexes when first arrived in India, that is the transition from single screen theatres to multiplexes, and thereafter in the post-embryonic stage, which is multiplexes becoming the generalized way of film viewing in India. Before I begin, let me give you a broad overview of the current status of the multiplex market. At present, Carnival Cinema, Inox, PVR and Cinepolis are the four major players, and together they control approximately 75% of the multiplex business in India. Now, this transition from the single screen theatre to multiplexes happened in the new millennium. So it is only in 2000 when multiplexes became operational in India. However, since 2014, multiplexes have been growing at a rate of 150 to 200 screens per year, and at present the single screen theaters have almost led way to multiplexes, and therefore, as I have already stated, multiplexes has become the way of a theatrical release of any film. Okay, so let's talk about the narrative. Obviously, when we talk about Hindi cinema, we'll have to mention the word Bollywood, and we all are fans of Bollywood, the song and dance sequences in Bollywood. Now, however, many scholars and have already written a lot about Bollywood, and particularly they have stated that Bollywood should not be a word which is synonymous to Hindi cinema, right? So Madhava Prasad or Ashish Rajadhyaksha, they have written at length about it. Rather, Bollywood, it should be seen as a particularly a 1990s phenomenon which happened to Indian cinema. So 1990, the economy opened up, as a result of which the Hindi films and the makers started making very NRI-centric films, right? The target audience became the NRI market. And therefore, films like Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge, Dil To Pagal Hai, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai, which are almost synonymous with the term Bollywood, right? And obviously, Shah Rukh Khan known as the Bollywood star. So these kind of films are very different. They're very, very NRI centric, and the NRI centricism is at the center of the narrative of these films. However, multiplex led way to a very different kind of films, right? And something which we have referred as niche films, right? Films which were non-mainstream. So for example, I've given here an example of a film like Being Cyrus. Being Cyrus is an English language film, right? It's very different because the subject itself talks about a dysfunctional Parsi family. And when I was in conversation, with Homi Adajania, who's the filmmaker of this film, he states that a film a film like Being Cyrus could be made at all because it was considered befitting for a multiplex audience, and that's why he kind of him coming up with a film like this coincided with that sort of time when multiplexes started mushrooming in India, right? So this is very interesting because therefore, films like Pyar Ke Side Effects, Shankar Beats, these are very, very offbeat films. These are non-mainstream films. These are films which are meant for English audience, a niche audience. And as Madhuja Mukherjee also states, that these films tended to recreate a sort of reality effect in terms of characterization, setting, plotting, and excessive interest in everyday details, and so on and so forth. However, so these films are very, very different from the NRI-oriented mainstream films which we have earlier referred as Bollywood. However, what has happened in the post-embryonic stage is that is when multiplexes almost became the generalized way of film viewing. These kind of films, again, smaller films like Anarkali of Ara, like Lipstick Under the Burqa, Mukti Bhavan, are not getting theatrical releases, are not getting prime time shows because multiplexes have changed their content strategy, right, in the post-embryonic stage, and they have resorted to mainstream Bollywoodish films, mainstream Bollywood blockbusters as their staple, which are primarily star-driven. Why? Because obviously blockbusters are sort of risk-free. It caters to a larger audience and it's kind of risk-free, right? Also, what I would like to note that it has also, the post-embryonic multiplex stage has also led way to a certain kind of films known as content-driven Hindi films. What is the nature of content-driven Hindi films? They are star-written in the sense they have a star at the center of the narrative. They have song and dance sequence. Their marketing budget is often higher than the production budget, right? So they're not low cost productions. However, they pick up taboo subjects. So for example, Udta Punjabi is about drugs in Punjab. Piku is about a father-daughter relationship where the father doesn't want the daughter to marry, right? These are very interesting taboo subjects being picked up. However, they're still very, very mainstream, very, very mainstream Bollywood in nature. So content-driven films are slowly becoming the staple of the of the post-embryonic multiplex market of India. And further, obviously, the fact that there's a consolidation in the market with only four players sort of running 60 to 70% of the business. This particular format, this particular content-driven format is, so to say, becoming the staple. As a result, smaller films, as I've already said, like Lipstick Under My Burqa, Mukti Bhavan, and I can give you, these are fantastic films, right? These kind of films, low budget, non-star-driven films, are not finding a platform, something which multiplexes gave way to during the embryonic stage. Obviously, we can take the argument further and talk about how the coming of the over-the-top platforms have led way, as an alternative platform for these small budget, low production, non-mainstream, non-Bollywood films. However, the scope of my presentation does not permit. However, there's a huge scope of research in this area. On that note, I would like to thank all of you for allowing me to present my argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bharat. Our third presentation is by Annalise Benjamin from Mitibai College of Arts in Mumbai and Fanoshka Rodriguez from Parvatibai Chobule College in Margao, India. They, in their talk, Prevailing Typecasts in Hindi Cinema, will highlight the plight of LGBTQ characters perceived through media, demonstrating the manipulated forms of homosexuality in mainstream media, And this will be followed by discussing the role of visual media literacy in stalling, essentially, masculine voyeurism and shunning deceptive portrayals. So Arya, can we please show the video for Annalise and Finoshka?
Good day to all. I'm Finoshka Rodriguez, and this is my research partner, Annalise Benjamin. And the title of our research paper is Prevailing Typecast in Hindi Cinema. Now, the conceptualization of homosexuality in Bollywood cinema is controversial. Many same sex relationships depicted in movies have received an outlash of homophobia. Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, which criminalized homosexuality, was introduced by the British. And it took so many years for the policy to be decriminalized. The portrayal of over the top gay characters didn't highlight the problem faced in the gay community, but were just tools for comedy. The heteronormative script never does justice to the gay characters. Many movies over the years have seen different groups of romance between the characters. For instance, the movie Sholay looks at the relationship between two friends who share the said brotherly love. This was a roaring theme in many movies of yesteryears. An example is Girlfriend, a cringe-worthy saga where a woman portrayed as a lesbian had an unhealthy obsession and possessiveness with a female friend. This paper will look at the portrayal and the typecast of homosexual characters in Hindi cinema.
This paper takes into consideration Judith Butler and her theory of gender trouble. Judith Butler created a foundation to queer theory where she defined performativity, wherein individuals can perform alternate roles. She suggested that heteronormativity is never changing and it holds prejudices against homosexuality. Homosexuality, an associate of comic relief. The acceptance and societal attitude towards homosexuality, whether male or female, is rather questionable. As time progressed and our community began gradual acceptance, filmmakers were uncertain how to showcase homosexuality through their films. Turning towards their comfort zone, comedy, they rattled the homosexual community and typecasted them. For long, the Hindi film industry has stereotyped the LGBTQ into facial cliches. Homosexuals began typically being cast as crude caricatures, mere accessories solely for comic relief. Typically, the forerunner of homosexual films is the 1971 Badnaam Basti. It was considered to be too progressive for its time. The conjugal relations between two men was a taboo topic and unspeakable. The makers of the film opted to leave out explicit intimacy to be on the safe side. But the mere name and theme of the film bewildered the audience. Badnaam Basti would have kick-started conversation ages ago if given the chance. In 2008, Karan Johar took the onus of presenting a film that would help facilitate dining room discussions on homosexuality. But unfortunately, it added to discomfort and the cringe factor for the homosexual community. Dostana falsely showcased homosexuals as vindictive and jealous protagonists. Two heterosexual men, Sam and Kunal, fake a homosexual relationship. Kunal mainly is in a perpetual state of hetero anxiety. He is petrified of being perceived as an actual gay. Unable to focus on the intensity of their actions, Dostana casually equates being gay to acting like women. The over sexualized dancing adds to the conundrum. To win their friend over, they compile to the worst action any heterosexual man would consider doing, kissing another man, which is deemed as public humiliation. In Student of the Year, Rishi Kapoor plays a flamboyant and easily swayed man who is lonely and bitter, foolishly falling in love with a straight, married man. The portrayal of the LGBTQ community has been restricted to men being extremely feminine. His antics towards his love interest are termed as comedy. The underlying meaning being that it takes the death of a homosexual man to bring peace to a group of spoiled rich heterosexuals. Deemed as a milestone for Indian commercial cinema, Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan is no different. Realistically, closeted homosexuals are unable to contain the pressure and the need within them to come out to their families is dire. Aman even agrees to marry a girl to keep his family happy and blissfully unaware. An Orthodox Indian family till date is not able to fully accept their children as homosexual. Finding approval comes easy for the couple, which is far from reality. Despite all its positives, the film shows Kartik in a comic light, a man willingly agreeing to make a joke of himself wearing a rainbow flag and a cape, bare chested, being beaten up by his partner's father.
The transgression in recent times has added complexity to the LGBTQ plus narrative. The rawness of stories is seen to be relatable amongst youth who are confused about their gender identity. The plight of homosexual characters perceived throughout media has been seen across movies, television shows, social media have created as well as manipulated homosexuality for a very long time. Deepa Mehta's movie Fire explored a relationship between two married women, and it was way ahead of its time. The movie revolves around two sister in laws who are deprived of physical intimacy by their husbands as they find solace with each other. Fire and the conversation that began around the movie's general reception encouraged lesbians and gay rights activists in India to be more vocal about their existence. The narrative in the movie, Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To Aisa Laga, highlights the emotional trauma, including alienation, loneliness, and shame that the gay community faces for coming out of the closet. Most homosexual relationships in movies are played by cisgendered characters, which ought to change in the coming times. Bombay Talkies, an anthology consisting of 4 stories with various themes pertaining to sexuality, loneliness, and visibility. Now, the anthology I Am comprises of 2 stories of homosexuality. The first story, Omar, looks at the plight of many gay men who were raped, extorted, killed so they could hide their sexual relationship. The next story is titled as Abhimanyu, who is haunted by memories of sexual abuse in the hands of his stepfather and is conflicted with his sexual identity. Now, Abhimanyu battles with sexual displacement. The movie Aligarh advocates gay rights, but the beauty is that it does so by constructing a deeply moving portrait of love and loneliness. The realization dawns upon us that our contribution, whether big or small, hounded a mild smiling man to death simply because of his sexual preference. The movie, My Brother Nikhil, addresses AIDS and homosexuality in a very dignified manner. This movie proved the rawness of gay relationship where the two partners fight, cry, laugh, and even express jealousy. The movie Kapoor and Sons portrayed the complicated layers of difficulties faced by families on learning about the sexual orientation of one of their sons.
Cinema requires a multifaceted and vivacious gay and lesbian characters painting the screen with confidence and ease about their sexuality so as to make the audience at large overcome their awkwardness pertaining to homosexuality. People struggling to look like one of them and in future homosexual characters should be portrayed on screen by people bringing to life the LGBTQ circle. Thank you.
Thank you, Annalise and Finoshka. Our last presentation for this panel, we have Amrita Biswas from Goethe University, Frankfurt, Germany. Her talk is titled Mapping the Urban Cinephilia, an Analysis of Film Festival Networks in Kolkata. This article delineates the cartography of alternative films in Kolkata with reference to the networks of circulation in the post-millennial era. Focusing on various festivals in Kolkata, this paper attempts to critically inquire into how film festivals form counter publics that by screening films that are iconoclastic in charge, offer the scope to critique the repressive mechanisms of the state corporate nexus. Biswas will also problematize the monolithic notion of cinephilia in Kolkata by emphasizing various anecdotes that reveal how crowds flocked to festivals not because of cinephilic interests, but to watch uncensored sexually charged scenes, the unavailability of which in the festival schedule led to chaos and mob fury. So Arya, could we please play that presentation?
Hello everyone, my name is Amrita Biswas and I'm currently associated with the Graduate and Colleague Configurations of Film at Goethe University Frankfurt as a PhD researcher. The title of my paper is Mapping the Urban Cinephilia and Analysis of Film Festival Networks in Kolkata. This paper seeks to study the technological and cultural infrastructures of the Kolkata metropolis as crucial nodes that influence the development of diverse non-mainstream cultural productions in the region. The city serves as a breeding ground for the materialization of multiple forms of independent filmmaking by constituting cinephilic domains such as cineforums and film festivals. While the age of access enables digital cinephilia to flourish by virtue of the network, physical spaces such as cine organizations, film clubs, and film festivals still constitute significant nodes of cinephilic interaction. Locating the current cinephilic movement in a longer tradition of cinephilia in Kolkata, this paper aims to register the shifts and continuities that the process has manifested over the years. My attempt will also be to undertake an anecdotal analysis that unbuilds a monolithic notion of cinephilia to trace the fissures inherent in the conception of Kolkata cinephilic culture. Of crucial significance to my paper will also be an understanding of how the arrival of digital technologies have shaped the production and circulation of non-mainstream films. While the digital camera has provided the filmmaker with flexibility and convenience, the proliferation of video sharing websites has enabled him or her to showcase the films and interact with the audience. In this age of access, the network or experience economy forms a significant strand of the economic structure where service providers vie for the attention of consumers who pay to remain connected to crucial networks. The virtual cine communities connected over the network constitute a significant strand to analyze contemporary cinephilia. The other significant cinephilic strand that has fueled alternative practices includes the festivals and cine organizations that are anchored to a specific territorial domain, imbibing from as well as contributing to the cultural specificity of the region. Film festivals have emerged as a significant refuge for the cinephiles since they occupy a liminal space between the older forms of first-generation pre-televisual cinephilia, where the only access to films was in movie theaters, and contemporary forms of cinephilia. New media technologies have altered the pattern of cinema's production and consumption, paving the way for the generation of cultural products that are in a dialogue with the global network of media output. This is evident in the alternative films of filmmakers like Aditya Vikram Sengupta, Q and Kaushik Ganguly, among others, that have traveled globally in the film festival circuit. Tracing the legacy of festivals in the city of Kolkata, this paper will provide a brief historical account of the cultural coordinates of the city that helped usher in festivals and promoted their development to the current forms in which they manifest themselves. Initially, film festivals in Kolkata were organized by film societies either individually or in collaboration with each other. The first international film festival in India was organized by the central government in Bombay in 1952. Representatives and delegates from 12 nations had attended this festival that was simultaneously organized in the cities of Kolkata, Madras, and Delhi. Kolkata witnessed a flurry of enthusiasm that was prompted by the Italian neorealist films, with the members of the Calcutta Film Society taking the opportunity to acquaint themselves with globally acclaimed films and directors. Kolkata eventually hosted IFFI, or the International Film Festival of India, after it was decided by the centre that every alternate year a different city would host the festival. Thus, Filmotsav 1982, organised by the Directorate of Film Festivals, NFDC, in collaboration with the Government of West Bengal and the Indian film industry, was held from the 3rd to the 17th of January in Kolkata. Focusing on different aspects of the 1982 festival, Anandolok's issue dated 2nd January 1982 featured articles by Mrinal Sen, Shyam Benegal, Basu Bhattacharya, among others, that critically delved into diverse aspects of the festival. Stating that the 1952 festival had been a watershed moment in the cultural history of Kolkata, Basu Bhattacharya noted that the initiative of organizing film festivals that had created such a stir in the cultural scenario of the city did not, however, grow at a steady pace. Bhattacharya attributed this to not only the government officials' incompetence in festival programming, but also to the inept audiences who primarily attended the festivals or joined the film societies to watch uncensored, sexually charged films that would not be theatrically released in India. Regretting that the aforementioned section of audience had outnumbered the people who were inclined towards the cinematic aesthetics of the text, he stated that the former group were often responsible for disrupting festival shows, especially when the films lacked the sexual content that their titles supposedly promised. Thus, besides being the cultural insignia of the city, the festivals also conjured various incidents that contributed to the event's distinct layer of experiences, thereby leaving an imprint on the collective consciousness of the city. Sex Rights and Calcutta's Special Madness, a report featuring in Sunday Midday dated 21st January 1990, elaborates upon the chaos that was created during the screening of Sex, Lies and videotapes at the film festival. The word sex in the title had created such a curiosity in the minds of the people that police armed with lathis and rifles had to intervene to manage the huge crowd that had assembled for the film screening. Since the auditorium had refused to grant entry beyond a certain limit, the mob turned violent and eventually managed to barge into the fully packed theatre, only to live in disappointment as the film lacked sexually charged scenes. The author of the article opines that the madness peculiar to the festival is only a symptom of Calcutta's special madness. It is necessary to undertake an analytical journey through such anecdotes to comprehend the different motivations that the audience had in attending film festivals. These anecdotes act as significant ruptures in the monolithic conception of the city's cinephilia that helps shed light on the multiple dimensions that cinephilic cultures and institutions encapsulate. This paper will now focus on the unique cultural arena that has emerged in Kolkata with the growth of film festivals such as Kolkata People's Film Festival or KPFF, Little Cinema International Festival and Kolkata International Film Festival or KIFF. While KIFF is an enterprise managed by the government of West Bengal to encourage global cultural transactions as well as to present the city of Kolkata as a kinetic space that encourages prolific cinephilic engagement, KPFF, organized by People's Film Collective, renders prominence to voices that counter the exploitative impulses of the state. Besides screening films, KIFF organizes diverse cultural events that are aligned with the discursive regime of the festival, attempting to create a symbiotic space where ideas and opinions about films can be exchanged. Having been organized at Nand until 2010, the ceremony was shifted to Netaji Indoor Stadium in 2011 and it was imbued with glamour by inviting Bollywood stars for delivering the keynote address, stating that the infusion of Bollywood glitz into the ceremony displays the interests of the authorities to introduce a high glamour quotient into the festival spirit. The initiative has been criticized by the organizers of the Kolkata People's Film Festival or KPFF, a festival that consciously refrains from aligning to governmental or corporate interests. The Facebook webpage of KPFF describes it as a no-sponsorship, people-funded film festival organized on the maxim of people's culture with people's support. Aligning in spirit with the KPFF, the Little Cinema International Festival focuses on contemporary visual arts practices and the ways in which the cinematic language is being influenced by the proliferation of small-budget, self-circulated, personal films that resist strict categorization. The festival is organized annually by TENT, also called as the Theatre for Experiments in New Technology, which is an alternative platform to facilitate experiments with moving images. While festivals and cine organizations comprise significant strands to analyze the circulation of films, the city provides a space where the multidimensional flows of media, capital, and culture condense, intersect, and flourish. Of crucial significance, however, is the need to unbuild a unidimensional perspective on urban cinephilia to register its multiple contours. This paper engages in this critical exercise to document the diverse motivations that have sustained the cinephilic institution of film festivals in the city of Kolkata. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If we can have all the speakers or our presenters turn their cameras on, that would be amazing. Wonderful. So I am personally very excited with all the different presentations in this panel. I was vigorously taking notes as each one of your presentations were playing, but as I've said before, we do want to focus on you. So I'm gonna ask some simple questions to get the conversation going. We do have questions that are coming in from the YouTube chat. So we'll try to get to all of them if possible. And in that regard, my request would be that you keep your answers to maybe 2 to 3 minutes each. That would be amazing. So I'll start with Dr. Sharma. And Rekha, your presentation is of special interest to me just because my own area of research is in migration, especially looking at South Asian diaspora in the United States. And it's just fascinating how that concept of intersectionality sort of also becomes more accepting or less accepting as, say, immigration rules change or as time passes on. So one of the things I would want you to comment a little bit upon is the fact that if you look at the history of Indian migrants coming to the United States during segregation era, so I'm talking way back when we had the Chinese Exclusion Act in place, right? And at that time, there were anti-miscegenation laws in place. So we actually do see intermarriage between Indian migrants and African-American population in the country. And it seems that in Mississippi Masala, that's like all of that sort of niceness just goes away, right? So I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit about what happens in the recent years that becomes a challenge in terms of those intersectionalities becoming a bit more rigid.
Well, I think you're right. I think there were always difficulties in intersectionality as far as identity, economic class, race, cultural background, all of those things have mattered. Interestingly, what your comments and your questions were reminding me that when Dr. Workney and I were working on this manuscript, it was right around the time that Senator Harris was running for president. We were debating on whether or not to introduce that political angle as far as the contemporary example and the conversation that her background has sparked, her mother being from India, her father being from Jamaica, and just the media discourse about how to define her, how to describe her in terms of her cultural background, but then also the challenges that she was going to face as a female running for a political office, her educational background, her whole story. It was being dissected among all of those dimensions. She ended up dropping out of the race at one point, so we decided not to address that directly in our chapter, but I think it's something that has come to the forefront even more now that she has been elected vice president of the United States. There are tensions, I think, from external audiences, from the American culture, if you will, but also there are a lot of people weighing in other countries about how to define her. And a lot of the conversations that I've been observing are about those intersections of her gender, of her cultural background, her educational level, and every aspect of those dimensions is being debated. And I think it's a source of conflict for some people. It's a source of pride for other people.
Thank you so much for that answer. And this just goes to see how our notions of what is okay and what is not okay sort of change, because you're right, one of the narratives around VP Harris has been, is she also even Black enough if her father was from Jamaica? So, and that flows very well into the whole Mississippi Masala thing, where you're like, are you white enough? Are you Black enough? Like, what's going on there? Thank you so much for sharing it. My next comment / question / need for explanation is for Dr. Borat. And Ipshita, you mentioned that when you were talking about multiplexes, I couldn't just stop thinking about my time in India as a young college student. I have seen movies in single theaters. Like, I'm that old enough to go to single movie theaters, and then the change to multiplexes was happening when I was in college. Could you actually talk about this class element that comes in when you're a viewer who's going to a multiplex as opposed to a viewer when you're going to a single theater?
Yes. So absolutely, the situation right now is there are less than 10,000 single screen theaters in India, and most of them are in southern part of the country. That's because there are some rules and regulation by government. But apart from that, as Sangeeta Gopal, the scholar, has also stated extensively and written on that in today's state, if you're watching a film, it's 60% of the revenue of any Hindi film is coming from the multiplex business, right? So basically, then you equate multiplex as the platform, or as the platform where a Hindi film will get released. Now, obviously, the class factor does work in the sense. So what happens is, in a single screen theater, you can sit the seating accommodation is very different. Number one is multiplex is placed inside a mall, right? So when you enter, you're being, checked. And so you cannot imagine, people from across class to be even entering, a multiplex. And therefore, obviously, the audience consideration, the audience configuration is very, very different. So multiplex audience is very different, about which, again, scholars like Adrian Ethik, Douglas Hill has, again, written extensively that the category, the addressal is very different for multiplex audience. And therefore, this category came up called niche films, because multiplex was catering to a very different audience. Whereas when you look at single screen theaters or the audience configuration of a single screen, the class barriers were not there. You could literally be sitting, with people from any class or caste or any background per se. And also they were not considered very sanitized. So for even if I talk about a personal story, so my my father was not allowed to go to a movie hall. That's because it was not considered good for somebody from a respectable family to visit a movie hall. And it's so the granddaughter is now teaching film, so that's a different story altogether. So this is the kind of change which has happened in terms of audience configuration with the multiplexes coming into being. But I also, my study more or less focuses on the second stage of multiplex, when multiplex is rather, which is there in the paper as well, which is in the larger paper, where multiplexes are now mushrooming into smaller cities. Where so it's in the metros, or obviously it is all multiplexes, but it's now kind of diverting into smaller cities, and therefore the kind of narrative changes which are now coming into being when multiplexes are no more catering to so-called the niche films, so they have now found a platform in the over-the-top platform, OTT platforms. So this is what my paper explores particularly.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, there are follow-ups for each one of you, so please stick around. I just want to make sure that the speakers get to say their piece a little bit. And of course, I'm being greedy as well, so I want to ask everyone questions. So my next question is for Annalise and Finoshka. And I actually particularly have a question about your methodology, because you use Judith Butler's framework, and she's of course she's explaining heteronormativity, but she's a Western feminist scholar. And I'm wondering if in your study, you adjusted this idea of heteronormativity to non-Western lens, so as to say, because you were looking at the Indian market.
Okay, so our paper looks at the portrayal of homosexual characters, the typecast, as well as we speak about the transgression. Annalise will speak about the theory.
Yes, actually, we use Judith Butler's heteronormativity mainly because the concept of performativity. It was important to understand that gender roles cannot be molded and we can't fit into them as per what society suggests. So, which is why we chose Judith Butler's theory to further, transition into our paper. And as you said about the Indian market, yes, of course, it does cater to them, because in an Indian society, you are told in which way you're supposed to behave and which way you're not. So this was an ideal, element which we planned on using.
So this telling almost is also happening from more of a Western lens, hence.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Amrita, I had never looked at film festivals like this before. Thank you so much for enlightening me. And one of the things I perhaps hope that you can elaborate on is this notion of sort of the government providing permissions and and kind of encouraging these film festivals all across the country. So why does the audience have this expectation that there is not going to be any level of censorship there? I'm very curious to know that.
Thank you for your question. This is not exactly about what the audience expected. This was the structure that was in place, that films which are screened at festivals, they do not have to get the CBFC certificate. So, so this was a time when people were thinking of progressive movie making or of film culture, where it's about authentic cinema or aesthetics. So all these notions are important, and film festival was that nodal point where if there was censorship, then you are kind of providing a hurdle to how film culture is propagated. So, this was basically a legal structure that they wouldn't have to get the CBFC certificate, that they wouldn't have to go through censorship, and that is exactly where not just film festivals but also the film societies provided the opportunity for people who wanted to watch uncensored scenes could get the opportunity. So I remember I spoke to Shubhendru Dashgupta also, who is a veteran film society activist. Because I was reading these on print and I was wondering if he could give me an idea of how it was, because he was there in those times watching the films in film societies and organizing screenings, programming. And then he told me that there was this letter that was written by Satyajit Ray to the government, where he said that that the Federation of Film Societies decides which film will be screened makes it a problem, because then there is a curatorial strategy that's going into what is film heritage, or why does this film need to be shown at the film society, So there is this idea of, there's this elitist notion of heritage and the transmission of cultural heritage. Now, these, of course, the knee-jerk reaction is that, of course, it is the cinephilia. And whenever one goes through the bulletins or journals that are published by KIF, which is the Kolkata International Film Festival, that was an initiative of the government, you would find these statements that, it's Calcutta's great culture and Calcutta has to be the cradle of Indian cinema. Pather Panchali happened, it was a big thing. So there was this expectation, and cinephilia would eventually be the trope that one would connect to film festivals. So that is exactly what I'm trying to argue, that of course there was a crowd, and of course there was a cultural cultural specificity that Kolkata had. But then one would also need to think that cinephilia is not the monolithic or the stable category that Kolkata had. It had fissures, and it's necessary to understand these fissures when one talks about cultures that have propagated amateur or alternative films in the city.
Thank you so much, Amrita. It was very to me personally, it was fascinating, because I actually wasn't even thinking of the censors. I wasn't even thinking of the censor board. I was actually just thinking of just generally government going like, oh, hey, show these movies. When we know that I'm from Uttar Pradesh, and I know that something like this, they will just be like, this is an attack on our culture. So my reaction was more with like, how does it align with party politics? But I'm very.
This is the elitist liberal Bhadralok culture as well that goes into festivals later. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah, the context of the Kolkata thing actually does make a lot of sense, because I'm like, film festivals, UP, like you can have you will definitely have some gundas standing outside and just going like, this is not against our culture. We do have a few questions from YouTube for all of you, and I'm going to try to make it quicker this time so they can get answered. This is a very general question for everyone. And the question is it possible to change the mindset of people which is so deep rooted through years of cinema? What can we do? And any one of you can unmute yourself and kick off the conversation. Is it possible to change the mindset of people which is so deep rooted through years of cinema?
I'll weigh in first, I guess, to get the conversation going. I think it is possible. I think there is something, and this might be true of other cultures as well, but I think with India in particular, there have been so many influences from other cultures around the world, yet there are kind of ways that India has absorbed a lot of those influences and made them true to the cultural values that India has had for thousands of years. So there is something that's intrinsic to India, to South Asian cultures. At the same time, I think if you look at the explosion of cinema, and as we've heard from some of the other presenters today, going from that kind of uniformity of the commercial tropes, and now getting these different genres, different niche types of films, different voices, different storytelling formats, different topics that are being taken on that were taboo to discuss. And I think all of those things are starting important conversations or giving voice to conversations that weren't getting a public arena earlier. The other thing that is really fascinating to me about the study of films in this particular cultural context is they reach audiences that maybe have varying educational levels, linguistic diversity, different age groups. They are common arenas for people to have conversations where they might not ordinarily have been able to interact in other forms of media or in other venues. So I think there's definitely potential. Clearly, I think the numbers alone, as far as the audiences, the output of films, the money that's involved, there is clearly a willingness to engage and to absorb these types of stories and to debate them, and how that comes out in reality is certainly going to be specific to the topic and to the area, but I think there's potential.
I think I'll agree to what Dr. Rekha just said, that I'm not going to talk about changing the mindset, but I'm going to comment on how films can sensitize audience to a specific topic. And I think the example I would provide here is of Dear Zindagi. So when Dear Zindagi was screened, a lot of people became sensitive to mental issues, and it was a very significant film because it kickstarted this discussion and these discourses on mental health, and there were social media discussions within academic communities, and it's very interesting that it was after Dear Zindagi that the song of Psycho Saya in Saho, they had to change it. It was no longer Psycho Saya, because now you cannot just attack someone as psycho. And again, we had Mental Hai Kya, which also had to change the title to Judgmental Hai Kya, because mental again is about creating a taboo on someone who's experiencing mental health issues. So there is this thing that it sensitizes the audience. There are issues and all that just go unnoticed, that are just brushed under the carpet. And when these films come out, there is a discourse that they kickstart, and that is significant.
I think it's also demonstrated by the fact that, and this goes back to partially what Rekha was presenting, right? That something that even doesn't get accepted in India right away might actually get accepted abroad by the diaspora and then get re-exported as a more accepted form. And that's also very emblematic of how globalization is changing that deep-rooted mentality. I'm sorry, Ipshita, go ahead.
I'll just comment one thing. It's a very interesting thing you said, because a Netflix film is a Netflix film. I mean, it's hardly an Indian film or an American film. You know, the audience configuration itself has once again changed, because even the people who are viewing these, going to the multiplexes are the same audience now who is, is kind of watching a lot of over-the-top content. So, the filmmakers also, are kind of picking up subjects which are more for a global audience, right? So whether it be films which are meant for theatrical release or which are films which are, so I think that the audience configuration, because of obviously globalization, it has changed completely. And therefore the films which are coming into forefront, right? They're also picking up subjects which are not specifically Indian, which are not specifically pertaining to, or rather picking up, exploring taboo subjects, and then therefore, which is kind of more open to audience at length in general. I just feel that.
We are almost running out of time, but we have more questions. So I'm going to probably give everyone 30 seconds to address this specific bit. With Annalise and Finoshka, one of the questions that is coming up, which perhaps also might link to some of your other presentations, is how will censorship by the Indian government of OTT platforms like Netflix and Amazon, how will it impact the future of shows like Made in India, which is more, which does have a lead character? How will that get impacted? What changes do you expect to see? That's the first question. Maybe 30, 45 seconds to answer it.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the question, please?
Yeah, how will censorship by Indian government, the new rules by Indian government, impact the future of movies and shows like Made in Heaven on OTT platforms like Amazon Prime and Netflix?
So censorship is something that I think a lot of us are completely against, because our paper itself deals with homosexuality, which had censorship like way back before. So our paper deals with the transgression, the new roles that people play right now. Also, also it would be possible that a lot of LGBTQ plus roles in movies or on the other platforms could be played by people belonging to the LGBTQ plus circle, rather than rather than heterosexuals playing the LGBTQ plus roles.
And as you said about Made in India, the role of Arjun Mathur, even though it brought up so much of conversation, because we never spoke about a homosexual character as much as we did during Made in India, because it was portrayed in such a manner, but it was still a heterosexual man, right, who was portraying the character. So we do not have a very realistic portrayal, but of course, censorship, when it comes into the picture, it's going to change a lot, because already there's so much under the carpet. And with censorship, it's just an added bonus to, something that we need to bring out.
So unfortunately, not a very bright future there. And the last question is for Ipshita. Do you expect small screens coming back as sort of a gentrified form of watching cinema, like in the US? We see that things that were pushed aside are now coming back as hip and nice all over again.
That sort of change hasn't happened yet. Not so. For example, in Calcutta itself, Priya is the only single screen, which is kind of gentrified, but it has a very different audience altogether again. So it kind of plays on that old Calcutta Bhadralok kind of So a very different category of audience it caters to. But such experiments are yet to be seen in the overall scenario. Instead, now, the future itself of cinema is itself going to be toppled completely with the over the top. And it's a huge scope for research for everybody concerned with cinema. Yes.
Absolutely. I connect entirely in Tallahassee from Netflix and Amazon Prime. That's my connection to Indian movies. We actually have one last minute question, again, as a follow-up to the multiplex question. Dr. Bharat, do you believe that the type of mainstream films that are shown in multiplexes are more or less representative of Indian culture? I'll read that again. That the type of mainstream films that are shown in multiplexes are more or less representative of Indian culture?
Yes. Actually, there'll be a very different answer to this question. It'll be interlinked to multiplexes again in a way that, according to one of the reports, KMPG report, multiplexes are now catering to all the smaller cities. So in 2018, PVR opened in Hubli in Karnataka, then Bilaspur, Raipur. These are very, very small cities. And as a result, what is happening, what the films are doing is they are making their narrative. So Bareilly Ki Barfi is based in Bareilly, and Badrinath Ki Dulhania is based in Jhansi. So the smaller cities, but they're picking up taboos. They're picking up subjects which are taboo. So they're picking up homosexuality. They're picking up Dum Laga Ke Haisha is about this healthy woman and how the romantic relationship she's in with. So these kind of taboo subjects are being picked up now. Is it having an impact, or is it representing Indian culture? The idea of culture itself is getting toppled, I believe, in the current scenario with globalization. So yeah, that's kind of a little vague altogether.
I'll take that. Thank you so much to all our panelists. There are more questions, honestly, but we don't have time. We do need to wrap up. So thank you so much for joining us. Rebecca, if you want to take over from me now, I'll be eternally grateful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of our panelists. That was a fantastic, interesting, and lively discussion. Lots of different topics about cinema, but all of them really, really very interesting. Okay, now we would ask for those that are in this panel, you're welcome to log out from Zoom at this time. as we move into our farewell address. I would currently like to welcome Dr. Stephen McDowell, the Assistant Provost of Internet and International Initiatives, the John H. Phipps Professor of Communication at Florida State University, for some final words. Is he coming? Is he not on? Ah, there he is, Steve. Welcome back. So again, I would just like to welcome Dr. Steve McDowell for some final words for the 7th Annual South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. And greetings from Tallahassee. We're all distributed around the world. But again, a warm welcome to all of you in this valedictory session of the 7th South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference at Florida State University. We like to remember every year one of our founding members, Professor Kathleen Ernville from the Department of Religion, who passed a few years ago, was one of the key actors in getting this group going. Over the last 3 days, we've had a lot of deep insights from members of the research community that deal with a variety of issues in South Asia and from different parts of the world. We kicked off our conference with a great keynote from Dr. Eb Akat from the Hausman School of Journalism and Media at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And he discussed agenda melding from the South Asian perspective. We had Ambassador Munir Akram, Pakistan's permanent representative to the United Nations, join us on day 2, who offered his insights on the state of peace and stability in the South Asian region from Pakistan's point of view. And this morning, we all greatly enjoyed Dr. Banerjee's address on disinformation and misinformation across borders in South Asia. We've had 47 experts participating virtually from 7 different countries. So we think that that's been a great success in drawing all these people together and in facilitating the conversations. We're very excited to partner with Christ Deemed to Be University in India this year, both for their Media Meet annual conference that they've had going, which is in August this past year. And we look forward very much to continued collaboration. We have Professor Padma Kumar, MM, the head of the Media Studies Department at Christ, with us today, and you'll hear from him later. What we're finding is that the SAMCS conference is not just an event, but it's a family of media and cultural scholars and practitioners that keeps getting bigger every year. And this year, thanks to the virtual conference, allowed us to reach out in new ways. As you've heard, the significance of the South Asian subcontinent is growing, and it's both worthy of study to understand those cultures and media practices there, but also the connections around the world and the influences around the world. And so we see this interest in South Asian culture, South Asian media, as well as political and social issues in many forums. Just in closing, I want to thank the members of our organizing committee. John Mayo, you'll be hearing from him in a moment. Kailesh Kuchik from Christ University worked with us on the program. Sneha Nair worked on social media and also our media production. Rebecca Peterson is part of the program committee. Arya Adichan helped us with streaming. Asif Sheikh worked with the program committee. Stephanie Viverito is in our college helping with communications. Carrie Tharp helped with our finance. In our information technology support group, Mike Potts, Kyle Mueller, and Sean Banner, we appreciate your help very much. And then special thanks to our executive director, Vibhav Dewanji, who really led us in innovating in a whole bunch of areas this past year, when the technology, in programming formats, in reaching out to new people, so that Vibhav has really, it's a major accomplishment, which is in a large part due to his efforts. So thank you to all the participants who, by your presence, have demonstrated your commitment to collaborations beyond borders. And we hope to host you next year on campus and virtually for our 8th conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. McDowell. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. John Mayo, Director of the William A. Kerr Intercultural Education and Dialogue Initiative at Florida State University.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry there appears at the last minute to be a technical problem with my video. Not sure what it is, so I'll keep this brief and do it only in audio, unless the wonderful Vibhav Dewanji can figure out what's going on and get me on here. But I too want to express thanks to everyone. This has been an incredibly rich conference. I have the privilege of being present at the creation of the South Asia Media and Cultural Studies 7 years ago. And I think by far and away, from my experience, this has been the most successful one to date. It's also been the one, of course, you all know, that has been 100% virtual online. And it's a credit to the organizers that have kept this going so strong without a flaw for 2.5 days. There's so many takeaways from this conference that will be with me for a long time. And Steve, I think, gave a very good overview of the major programs. I would just like to compliment those who identified and then recruited our 3 outstanding keynote speakers. Each day, I think we had a wonderful beginning to the program. And each of those speakers presented unique but very powerful political economic themes for us to think about, which also set the course for the discussion the rest of each day. So from the political economy of South Asian media, we looked significantly, I think, well, at cultural significance of the internet and all of its manifestations in multiple panels. We also looked at the ways that different groups are represented. Specifically today, I think, with very strong panels talking about cinema and other industries in South Asia. So thank you all, but especially to my colleague and friend Steve McDowell for his vision 7 years ago, which launched us on this. Secondly, to Professor Rebecca Peters, who was instrumental in recruiting such a strong lineup of speakers and panelists this time. And to Vibhav Dewanji, who I would call the producer and director of this enterprise. He's been behind the scenes for a lot of it, but my gosh, what a wonderful job he has done throughout these 2.5 days. I really think we've set a model for how at least this conference, but I suspect many others will come to be in the future. Combination of Zoom and YouTube, it's allowed us to reach out and be much more inclusive than we've able to be in the past. And I want to thank all the presenters from wherever you are for taking the time for being with us over the last 2.5 days. And I hope very much that we'll see you again at future SMUCS conferences. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mayo. I would now like to introduce Dr. Tanu Kolibagwe from the teaching faculty of the Global Citizenship Certificate at the Center for Global Engagement here at Florida State University.
Thank you, Rebecca. I perhaps shouldn't take too much time because whatever I want to say has already been said by the tremendous Dr. McDowell and Dr. Mayo, but I quickly would like to say that the South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference has grown tremendously in the past 7 years since its inception. I have been a part of this conference for the past 3 years. And we were doing it before it was cool. Not only did we start focusing on the South Asian region before we had our first female minority vice president of South Asian Jamaican descent, the South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference is also path-breaking because we were virtual before COVID-19 took over our lives. So my personal hope being a part of this conference has always been that we continue to create these spaces for South Asian scholars, researchers, and diaspora. And as you see that with our partnership with Christ University this year, I hope that we get opportunities to truly keep on expanding beyond borders. And at the Center for FSU Center for Global Engagement, where I work, we are honored and always enthusiastic in bringing the world to Florida State University. A special shout out to Rebecca Peters and to Vaibhav Divanji. I think I could go about their skills and qualities for another 10 minutes, but I don't want to take too much time. Thank you so much for making our lives easier. And also a shout out to the CCI team that made this wonderful YouTube / Zoom session possible, where we could just really make this conference a part of our lives for the past 3 days. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And finally, for our valedictory address, we welcome Professor Padma Kumar, MM, Head of the Department of Media Studies at Christ University, on the topic of Beyond the Boundaries of Cricketing Nationalism in South Asia. Welcome, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Rebecca. And it's such a pleasure to meet all of you, and it's an honor to be part of this South Asian Media and Culture Studies conference. And I come from a city called Bangalore, and that's part of the English dictionary. In fact, it's both a noun and a verb. Bangalore is a word that you could find in the English dictionary. And from an American perspective, that's not so pleasant a word, because it means how some of the Indians seem to be taking away the IT jobs of people who are there in the Silicon Valley. So, but then I think our relationship is something that is beyond that understanding, and I hope it will flourish. And the Florida State University and Christ University partnership in building good academics is something that we look forward to. So thank you for having me here during this particular valedictory session. And I hope I'll stick to the time. And let me also thank Vaibhav for having helped me the last minute. There was some technical glitch I was facing, and he was kind enough to request me to send the PPT, and I'm using the PPT that he'll be sharing it on my behalf, and I'll speak from here. Vaibhav, may I request you to, okay, great. So we can start with the PPT. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So what I chose to speak on is this, on this topic of beyond the boundaries of cricketing nationalism in South Asia. So one of the key things that I would like to start off at the very outset is that this is going to be more of a theoretical exploration rather than something that is done in a more rigorous on the field kind of a way. So it's a theoretical take. Given the short duration that we have, I thought it would be good to raise a few questions in terms of cricketing nationalism in South Asia. Okay, so let me go ahead. May I have the next slide, please? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I'm sure these are things that many of us are familiar with, but I thought it could be setting a good foundation to build on a few other points. The nation is something that many people in the nation studies point out to be a notion. I mean, it is imagined into existence. It's not as though it's already always there, but something that is imagined into existence. That's there. And so once we get into nation nationalism studies, we find out that there are a huge array of positions that people tend to take. For instance, some people believe that the idea of India, for instance, is something that can be dated back to the Harappa and Mohenjo-daro era, and that India should be proud about having had kings like Chandragupta Maurya, or for the matter, Emperor Ashoka, or if somebody's, let's say, more secular, they might also accommodate King Akbar, right? And they would proclaim that this is the glory of India's past, and so on and so forth. So it's mostly ethno-nationalists who tend to take such a position, and they try to believe that it's not as though India came into existence from 1947, that is when they got independence, but it has been there for a very, very long time. The spirit of India, the cultural core of India has been there for a very long time. And that's a position some people take, and they believe it's a discovery. And there are also people who believe that, given the kind of democratic ethos that started seeping in post-French Revolution and American Revolution and all that, it was necessary. And also the way in which the polity of nations started forming in different parts of the world, it became necessary for us to invent the idea of India. And here they believe that the idea of India has to be understood constitutionally, and that we need to look at horizontal comradeship, and so on and so forth. So they believe that the idea of the nation is an invention and not so much a discovery. So that's another position that some people have. But whether we go on the discovery track or the invention track, it is something that happens to be a very undeniable kind of a reality for all of us. Because wherever we go, when we try to move out of this geographical entity called nation, we need to have a passport, then the visa has to be processed, and so on and so forth, right? So, and there are citizenship cards and identity proofs and many, many such things which tell us that the nation, in the form of the state and other such things, is here to stay, right? So, but what's more interesting for me is how our conception of nation and nationalism often, we might have a variety of understandings about the idea of nation nationalism, but before even we concretize our notions, we tend to figure out how we are taking certain positions based on our own nationalistic ideology. For instance, I believe that I would like to believe that I'm a nation agnostic, right? And that position is something that I draw from certain ideological schools from where I come from. So that's how I would like to present the idea of nation, and that's what drives me to see certain things in certain ways. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So cricket is a sport that lends itself readily for stepping beyond the sporting boundary. It's not a game. I'm sure some of those who are following cricket would have heard about this post-colonial thinker and writer named C.L.R. James from the Caribbean islands. And he lived a lot of his life in England as well. So he used to proclaim something along these lines. If somebody claims to know cricket and knows only cricket, then they do not know cricket. So what he meant by that is that there is so much beyond cricket. I think it was Tim Barnes, one of the Times editor in the 90s. He proclaimed that the idea of so if somebody's claiming that they know cricket in, say, English cricket, if they claim so, and if they do not know the diasporic equation over there, they do not know English cricket. If they claim to know Australian cricket, and if they do not know the Aboriginal rights concern over there, then they do not know Australian cricket. If they proclaim that they know Sri Lankan cricket, and if they do not know the Tamil nationalism over there, then they do not know Sri Lankan cricket. If they claim to know Pakistani cricket, and if they do not know the religious equations over there, then they do not know Pakistani cricket. If somebody claims to know South African cricket, and if they do not know the apartheid movement, then they do not know cricket, right? So cricket is something that goes beyond the field and has a huge role to play in the way in which the social, political, and cultural and economic equations of the country operate. So that's the kind of a role that cricket as a sport tends to take itself, and it's not as though the other sports do not take it, but yeah, cricket does take it in a very visceral form for people in South Asia. Next slide, please. Thank you. So international cricket, just like most other mediatized global sport, offers a platform for performing the nation. So of course, sport is something that operates in this media complex, sports media complex. Cricket operates in the sports media complex, and so people participate in this engagement with cricket in this sports media complex. And so they perform the nation in particular ways. Both the players, the ones who are screening the performance, and apart from that, those who are consuming the game, all tend to perform the nation at some level or the other. For instance, the match, usually an international cricket match, starts off with the national anthem, right? Quite like in many other sporting contexts. So the national anthem is an indicator that it's not as though you should see the players as players or the sport as just sport, but to see it as people coming from certain particular national backgrounds participating, and as though as an audience you have to consume it from your own nationalist kind of a position, right? So that's a kind of a persuasion it seems to be giving over there. And the players do have the name, say India or Bangladesh or let's say Sri Lanka entered on their shirts, and they are going over there. And apart from that, that's there in the cap, so the emblem is there. And apart from that, there are also flag waving members. So there are very obvious nationalist sentiments that gets exhibited in a sporting context. And so is it with regard to cricket. And of course, cricket also has a more nationalistic fervor in South Asian context because of its post-colonial background. So cricket is a game that was invented by the British, but a writer like Ashish Nandi would proclaim that cricket is an Indian game accidentally invented by the British. So that's the kind of context that we need to hold in mind. Next slide, please. So cricketing nationalism in South Asia is steeped in post-colonial history, regional tensions, identitarian politics, and of course it's a commercial blockbuster, and it's a carrier of many aspirations and anxieties. For instance, there are plenty of cricketers who have turned into national level politicians. The excellent example of Imran Khan in the case of Pakistan is something that we need to study. Take, for instance, Arjuna Ranatunga in the case of Sri Lanka. Take the case of Sarfaraz Nawaz in Pakistan again. Then where we did have, I think, one of the former captains of the Bangladeshi cricket team getting into the Awami League. So there are plentiful examples of cricket offering kind of a platform for retired people to launch themselves into a political context, right? So that's there. And apart from that, in India, so in fact, they say that if there is an India-Pakistan one-day international that is getting screened, then the possibility is that the number of people who are watching it on television is something that could be higher than the population of an entire continent called Europe, right? So that's how much cricket in the South Asian context is deeply connected to people's life. And so it's also one that carries a lot of dreams and anxieties because of the religious equations that operates and the loyalty that it demands and all that, especially for Indian Muslims. Whenever there is an India-Pakistan cricket match that is on, it triggers a lot of anxiety, and that's a separate topic altogether, but that's something that I just wanted to hint at this particular moment. Then the next one, please. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah. Yeah, so this is the one that I would like to end with. Sorry, the previous one. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so are there occasions when consumers of international cricket overcome nationalist boundaries? So there is this idea of belonging to a nation that people tend to hold on to while watching a match, and they respond that way. So somebody from the opposition party, opposition team might perform excellently well, but very rarely would there be a celebration of an opponent's great performance. But then there are occasions when there is some amount of let's say trespassing or breaking the boundary that cricket also lends itself to, and that's what I'm trying to hint at over here. So when one's nation loses, that's one occasion when people tend to have a relook at their own cricketing loyalty to the nation. I mean, it's not as though they give up or given, but then that's a moment when it is under crisis. Like for instance, when India started losing in the early 2000 part, and especially when there was also corruption case with regard to cricket, there were a lot of people who gave up on cricket and believed that I should not support Indian cricket anymore. So that's one instance that I would like to highlight over here. And then coming to the next point, when there is sporting excellence, like the India-Australia cricket match, a test match that happened just last month, It was a wonderful cricket match, and some of the Australian press started writing that India, we love your performance. So they did not want to be limited by their own nationalist loyalty, but they stepped beyond that and acknowledged the contribution the Indians made on the field, and they appreciated that. And so there was a brief moment when they were willing to look at it from a fuzzy zone. Then, of course, the Indian Premier League is a club kind of it's like the football Manchester United playing and like that. So it's a model that has been worked out in India in the past 1 or 2 decades. So there are players coming from different parts of the world playing for local city teams. Okay, and when that happens, there is a certain amount of fluidity that is created. And in fact, the India-Australia rivalry in cricket is something that seems to be very, very stiff. But in recent times, that has started toning down because the Australian players interact with the Indian players more often in platforms like Indian Premier League and all that. So are we moving towards a transnational kind of a position? That's something that Indian Premier League seems to be offering more points to consider. Then sports identity over the national. There are also people who believe that, I don't like, for example, the writer Ramachandra Guha, a cricket writer and a historian here in India, he proclaims that I'm more of a cosmopolitan when it comes to cricket. I don't watch it in terms of national commitment to my Indian team and other such things, but I watch it in terms of an appreciator of cricket. So I appreciate cricket rather than the team that is playing. So these are moments when people are willing to look at the boundary from a different point. But the crucial thing to remember over here, it's not as though they break the boundaries. It's just stepping out of the boundary, and obviously they are most likely to step back into the boundary. So that's what I wanted to set up over here, and maybe in the future we could open it up for further discussions. Thank you for your time and patient hearing. It's a pleasure. One last point that I would like to make. In August, Florida State University and Christ collaborated, and we had a media meet 2020. The theme was media literacy. So in August 2021, we are going to look at media/crises and challenges and choices, and it's going to be great, fun and rigorous academics. And I welcome all those who are interested to join us then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Padmakumar. That was very interesting. Cricket is such an important part of India that it was nice to think about it in these ideas. Well, thank you all for joining us for the 7th Annual South Asian Media and Cultural Studies Conference. It has been a smashing success, I think. And I do want to say, make sure you join us next year in 2022. Thank you for those in South Asia, in Europe, and in America that have been participating with us. And we are excited by the prospects that we have heard and discussed so far. And we definitely look forward to next year.